This show is produced by Resilient New Media, where your message matters.
The world will celebrate when you become rich like her, but you'll transform your life when you become rich like you. I believe when women start to trust themselves, when they start to lean into their power, when they redefine success for themselves, they literally can change not only their immediate surroundings, but they change the world for good.
Resilience is the armor, leadership is the weapon, and legacy is the monument. Welcome to Kim Talks Leadership and Legacy, profiling the elite speakers, coaches, and entrepreneurs making a global impact through their messages, uncovering their vision, capturing their strategies, and helping you build a sustainable ecosystem. I'm your host, Kim Hayden. Let's define your legacy. All righty. Welcome to the show, AJ. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Kim.
You speak a lot around confidence, wealth, the reinvention of self,
Hmm.
you know, the the kind of the evolution that I feel like we were making a lot of headway and now we're kind of pulling back. Um,
Yes.
Walk me down that road. Let's start first though with your human story
Mm.
of what are you doing? So just clearly lay that out for everybody and then take us into the Wayback Machine and start us on the journey.
Yeah. So I would say today I'm grateful and also very aligned in the fact that I am a speaker as well as a USA Today bestselling author. So my book, Rich Like Her, launched this year in January. And last month we found out it hit the USA Today bestseller list. Candidly, Kim, it's interesting to me because I remember thinking back as a child, I used to love to write. Like it was one of my favorite subjects, English. I was always good at English and I was great at math. But I grew up with a Brazilian mother who was determined to ensure that I would live the American dream. And so majoring in English was not a right revenue or a profitable job that I was going to ever get. And so I ended up working in wealth management for over 20 years. I worked at some of the largest financial institutions, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo Advisors, not only managing assets, but by the end of my career, I was developing strategies for nationwide companies. And along the way, Kim, I just started seeing a gap. I started noticing patterns where there were extremely successful women, right? We're at a record time where women are starting to hit positions of power that we've never seen them in. We're starting to see women in the next 5 to 10 years. The great wealth transfer is happening, which means women will control the majority of wealth in not only the United States, but globally. And so I started seeing those patterns, but what I realized is the women's financial confidence was not increasing despite financial literacy and access to information being an all-time high. And so I really started getting curious about why that was. And never want to point fingers, but it was suspect to me that the reality of the industry is that we have not, as women, we've not had access to our own financial power until sometimes the 60s or the 70s. And that's really only a generation ago. And so
I think it was 76 before in many states you could even open your own checking account without your husband's approval.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so there was a period of time where a woman needed a man or her brother, her husband, right? They needed access to a male to vouch for them to be able to have access to power with money and capital. And now here we are, right? 50, 60 years later, up against one of the greatest wealth transfers. And I always say it's not just a transfer of money, we're transferring power and choice. And we have a lot of women who are still embarrassed. They're feeling potentially guilty. There's some shame around not having the financial confidence that they should or feel like they should at this time in their lives. So, the lot of women that we work with, the majority of them are high achievers. They're highly successful. On paper, you would look at them and think they've got it all together. But the reality is they've got what I call one secret, and it's that they have a challenging relationship with money and finances. And so it's interesting that the book, as I mentioned, became a USA Today bestseller despite I always tell people, right, I didn't have a marketing budget behind it. I just started reaching out to everyone I knew. And the book resonated because the book is really around women's emotional wealth, women's their connection to time and relationship and health as a way to express wealth. And so I talk to women a lot today now about what I call whole woman wealth, which is 9 dimensions of wealth, including finances, but also their connection to others, their contribution, right? Their legacy, their purpose, their identity, the decisions they make. All of those create what I call whole woman wealth. And it's really just, I think, the beginning of what's possible for women when we start to look at money and finances is not just the only measurement of wealth.
So let's talk about so I love the fact that you mentioned you did a whole direct outreach. So obviously the message you have is really resonating. Otherwise the book wouldn't have been picked up. People
Yeah, and
wouldn't have
I
purchased
and,
it.
and I think the other reality too, and we shared this, we talked a little bit about before we started recording, but I think it's one thing to say, some people would say, well, that's woo woo, right? Like wealth is money, it's financial success. And I agree, it is that it's a matter of having financial stability. But there comes a point in everyone's life, men, women, where you have enough resources. And if you do not feel contentment and fulfillment, then most people start to think, well, where did I go wrong? I look at that as one of the number one reasons of burnout right now. I think a lot of people are burnt out because they have traded their time for a paycheck. And what we're starting to see is the great disillusionment of that trading my time and my talent for a paycheck, despite corporations being not loyal, right? We're in a time where record layoffs are happening, where people are being replaced by AI every single day. And I'm not, this isn't a conversation about AI. I think there's a place and I think there's
It's a
a
tool.
very interesting opportunity for it. But I do think there's a major disillusionment right now with individuals who are saying, well, I did everything I was supposed to, right? I got the job, I got the degree, I did everything that I was supposed to acquire this dream. And now I'm still where I'm at despite having done everything I should have.
And I do wonder if part of that is the education system. We have done uh, uh, an industrialized education system and work system. The term retirement, all of this is based on that assembly line
Yes.
type of work. Whereas now we're moving into globally, we're seeing this instead of a broadcast mindset, a narrowcast mindset of finding
Yes.
the people you align with, the people who will benefit from your experience, your insight, your knowledge, be it lived or educated academic.
And I like to pose, Kim, the fact that not all of us define wealth as the same, and we shouldn't, right? There are different definitions, and that's ultimately at the core, right? My book's called Rich Like Her, but I use that as a provocative way for women to think to themselves, well, what does that mean? Right? If what does it mean to be rich like her? Going back and thinking through where women have come over the past, right, 50, 70 years, and being told we could do anything and we could become anything, and then going and doing it, and then arriving and feeling like, well, wait a minute, this isn't all that I thought. I had to compromise my health. I had to compromise relationships. I had to compromise my time. All of those are what I believe contribute to well being, which is ultimately the word wealth actually, it came from the word well being. And so I think in a lot of ways, we've forgotten the other components to wealth besides money.
I think we've been caught up in a cycle of consumerism for so long that we don't know when enough is enough.
Yes.
I think we're so beating the Joneses, right? Because we're hollow inside, right? I
Hmm.
always challenge people, so people need to understand the statistics also. You need to understand everybody that's selling you a seven-figure solution, only 8% of businesses small businesses and entrepreneurs crack 7 figures, and if you're a
Yes.
female, it's only 3%.
Yes.
So, know your stats and know what you're working with. If we know that that is an industry average, I'm not saying limit yourself or have lower expectations. What I'm saying is have an educated strategy,
Yes.
right? Um, and having some realistic, so
Yes.
knowing what these are and rewarding yourself, but also knowing what that quarter million does,
Yes, and I think
right?
what you're also pointing to, you use the word hollow, and, people are always like, "Okay, so are you a financial advisor? Are you wealth manager? Are you a money mindset coach?" And I say, really, my team and I, we're in the business of creating aliveness in people, right? We work with high performing, high achieving women where money is no longer the metric, despite the fact that they're still feeling the pressure, the expectation, and the responsibility for it, and that will never go away. But how do we bring back more of her to herself, right? How do we make the joy, the ease, the peace in which she was always working towards? How do we make that possible for her? And so we do walk women through all of the components of wealth management, but we also really lean into helping her reclaim, right, or rediscover who she is now at this moment. Because I think as society and especially as women, right, we get into these modes, we start to build our identity, we start to create this version of ourselves that we have been conditioned, right, by society, by our parents, whomever you want to add to the list. And we forget that, like, we get to experience joy, right? We get to experience desire and pleasure and all the other things of life, but we get so accustomed to being in that rat race or that hustle, right? I cringe every time I hear the word, right? Side hustle or hustle culture, because I don't think it's creating the next level for women, right? I don't think that's where women ultimately are heading. I think we're a lot of women, and I look at, right, the models out there of the few women that are on the billionaire lists, right? Look at how they choose to live their lives. Someone would say, "Well, AJ, they have $1 billion. Of course they are." Well, they didn't, once they got there, right, there were a lot of choices for them. And I would also argue that when you become a millionaire, there becomes more choices than if you only have, right, $50,000 to your name. There's just I think where we're heading sometimes is to a world where there's just a lot of people who are really hungry to give more, to leave
Yes.
a legacy, to make an impact, and we're not really looking at how to make that possible except for to go buy more houses or to buy more clothes. So that is what we do, is we help women see all the possibilities of what wealth could actually mean to her.
And I think and that again is in the meaning, right? I
Yes.
ask people, so I have people that will come to me because they're in an origin spot of launching, you know, either their brand, their story, a small business over this one, because that's what I do well is I help them get the momentum, digital
Mhm.
momentum. And so I'll ask them point blank, how important is this to you?
Yeah.
I said, we're going back to university. I want you to think of this as, how long did you invest in your degree? Now I need you to take that same amount of time and invest in your brand, and that's you. Because at the
Yes.
end of the day, people are not buying things anymore, they're buying the people.
Yes.
They want
Experiences, proximity to someone who can relate to them that feels authentic,
Yep.
someone who doesn't want that transactional relationship. And, Kim, it's funny, I have also a very small team, and we're extremely high touch for that very reason.
Mhm.
We're extremely high touch because a big piece of what we haven't talked about is the loneliness of being a successful woman.
It is, because they're okay, let's talk on this. Like, I'm going totally off script with you because I've
I
been
love it.
really excited about talking about this. You just hit a really big point. I have a world I wanna leave just a bit better,
I love
right?
that.
And I think that that is the fear that women don't speak to other women
Yes.
because it shows us, "Oh, we should have never gotten it in the first place."
Yeah,
If
so
she's
it's
complaining,
interesting.
if she's
Yeah.
complaining,
Yeah,
she
so
must be dramatic.
there's a guilt, right? Or a like, I have so much,
Yeah,
how dare I, right? How dare I, feel disillusioned, or how dare I not be grateful is really the
exactly.
word, right? How dare I? I've received so much, I've worked so hard, and I think that that's part of the cycle that keeps women stuck, right? I was talking to a woman yesterday, I was coaching a woman, and she's like, "I feel imposter syndrome." And we started going through what imposter syndrome looked like for her. And it was that sneaky little, gremlin in the back of her mind that tells her that she doesn't deserve to be successful, that she doesn't deserve to have right financial success or relationship success because she didn't have that model growing up and she doesn't know anyone that lives in like she does. And
Yep,
it's hard, there's a lot of sayings, right? If you can't see her, you can't be her. And a lot of women, including myself, right, were working in dominated industries or getting to levels of organizations that people that look like you don't normally get to.
yep.
And you look around and you're like, well, how am I supposed to be? Like, how am I supposed to, like, what am I supposed to do? How do I belong, right? How do I belong in an environment where my very existence is not like a new thing? And so a lot of the women that we tend to work with, there's a lot of work we have to do around the emotions that are attached to their success, or the emotions that are attached to their money and finances, because they've never had, right, a space to get quiet and to think about that and to express it without judgment.
I think sometimes we sit here and what we do exceptionally well comes so fluid to us that we don't think we should ask for it because at home, we're carrying how much of the workload,
Yes.
right? So there's never been a financial equation to our, I guess, our genius. What makes
Our value,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
So what women I've found tend to do is we attach our identity, our value to roles. So for some women, that's my role as a mother, right? For some women, it's my role as a wife. For some women, it's my role as a professional or a business owner. And when those roles are right challenged, or when those roles fall apart, or there's a major, I was joking around with a friend the other day. I'm like, men go through midlife crises all the time, but women aren't allowed to. And the reality is we as women are constantly coming up against our identity, and there's always that opportunity for reinvention. But I think the biggest question that most women ask themselves is, well, do I have to right burn it all down for this next level? Do I have to make the different decisions and choices and consequences? So I think there's almost a double edged sword in the world of being a successful woman. There's a lot of expectations, and then there's also not a lot of support, right? There's just not a lot of individuals you can turn to. And that was at the core of, I always tell women, I'm like, I built what I wanted and what I was missing when I was in roles where I felt so alone and I didn't have anyone to talk to, because I also started from very humble beginnings. My mother lived in the favelas of Brazil. My father grew up on a cotton picking farm in Alabama. So I shouldn't have reached the level of success that I did, but I did it through hard work. I did it through education. I did it through building a great brand for myself while in organizations. And I remember when it was time for me to pivot and represent myself, I had these moments where I'm like, who do I think I am? But at the same time, I would turn around and build multi-billion, multi-trillion dollar strategies for wealth management companies. So there really is something that I think women get to discover on this new, right, in this new era, as I like to call it, a women's revolution. And it's not empowerment. Like, I don't love using that word. It's women taking back their own authority is ultimately what I think the next level for high performing, successful women is.
If you could only have 3 signals
Mm.
okay, um, patterns that you see in women who are, and let's just call it what it is, self-sabotaging, right? Because that's what we do. We burn
Yes.
it all down, right?
Yes.
So what are the signals? If you could say the top 3, what would they be?
Yeah, I would say the first one is that feeling of waking up and, right, I kind of call it almost like a dead inside, right? There's no aliveness. That's a big core piece of what we do is there aliveness in my day, or am I literally going through the motions? I was in a yoga class this morning, and this woman, you can tell, right, fit body, just you could tell though she just kept checking her phone. She just kept fidgeting, and I sat there and I thought, well, where did we become women where our value, our worth was created based off of what we can produce, right? Our productivity. So that if you're waking up and you're
Hey everyone, Kim Hayden here. You know firsthand how fast the media landscape is shifting, and honestly, just keeping up isn't enough anymore. We need to build brands that actually last. That's exactly why I've created resilientnewmedia.com, your ultimate hub for modern media strategies. And if you're ready to really level up, my ongoing 4-week masterclass is live right now, and I'm sharing the exact blueprints you need to thrive as a speaker of impact. Don't get left behind. Come build something resilient with me. Head over to masterclass.resilientnewmedia.com and let's get started together.
just kind of going through the motions, you have that lack of aliveness. That's number one. Number two is the moment, as I call it, is it's the fracture, right? This moment where what you thought you started out to do and who you've become is no longer aligned with where you need to be. I think, Kim, you could probably really relate to this, where there's a moment where you have to choose who I was. Is that going to get me to where I need to be? And,
Or should be.
change is not comfortable. I love change, but let's be honest, change is not comfortable. It's not easy work. But I always tell women, what's the worst case scenario, especially for the women that we probably both know? The worst case scenario is you can go back to what you were already doing. But what might be possible on the other side if you actually give yourself one small thing you can do to move yourself towards that new way or that new person that you're becoming? And then I think the third one, Kim, really goes back to we started hinting about it, is women have been raised to be competitive, right? We've been raised to compare. We've been raised to there's only one seat at the table.
And
And
we
I
and we
think,
still see that like in the public speaking space.
yes,
3
and
out
I
of 10 paid speakers are female. So
and
we're
I think the
knocking
next
off the other women.
evolution's yes, and the next evolution is collaboration, right? We are mightier together, and working in an industry that had 9% women when I started, and I think now it's maybe at 13, there is an epidemic, I think, in some industries where women still believe that they need to compete and compare to get ahead. But I've always found that my success has lied, and the women that we work with, their success, when they're at their best, they're actually in collaboration and connection with other women. So a big part of the work we do is bringing women together to remember how much we have in common versus how different we all are. And I think those conversations, in my opinion, we call them rich like her circles, are some of the most, honestly, just the most life-giving moments of what I do every day, to hear women who were potentially coming in guarded and leaving with new connections. And I don't call it networking, right? Networking's great, but a true deep connection of, "Hey, we actually really get each other, and let's walk in tandem together versus you running in a different direction or thinking I'm your competition."
Well, and I think that I think we're at a really interesting time where we will see massive shifts happening. How
Yes.
we work, how we communicate, how our communities grow. And I'm hoping, I'm hoping, I'm working on my side to make this work, that we will actually see shifts back to the community potlucks. So we
Mhm.
consider the people around us and we bring something that will feed and sustain those around us, that we show up and we're present, we're not looking at
Yes.
our phones,
Yes.
that we give space to people who are evolving or trying a new recipe, and that we just pull up another bench versus
Yes.
shoving somebody's pie off a table because there wasn't enough room. I just I it's interesting because we are coming full circle to the evolution of the first television set coming into homes. They've actually
Mm,
tracked the disassociation within community, which has led to, I believe, everybody goes, "Well, we know more, so we have more platforms to post on." I do think that there was fractures within homes that caused abuse and issues,
mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because we were disassociated from our community, so we didn't have an outside force looking in, and then that
Yes.
compounds everything that's at. And now where my daughter has a dumb phone. She's 25.
Mm,
She has no socials. She goes, "I'm good." She has no desire to chase the dollar. She has
that's exactly our oldest son is the same. He's gonna be 22, and he
yeah,
has 0 desire
hers is
to
she's
go down the same path.
exactly. She's like she went and she evaluated the different opportunities out there, and she goes, "I'm gonna go into a trade because guess what? AI can't fix the
Yes.
electrical in your apartment,
Yes.
and I can do that by myself if I need, or I can do it with a team, and I know what I'm gonna get paid." And
Mhm.
it's like, I get it, but, it's interesting what our children learn from us, right?
Yes.
And what our community learns from us, and are we putting the right signals out? Are we limiting ourselves, and then another young woman doesn't even step into the ring
Yes.
for the fear?
And that's candidly my greatest next. I'm doing work primarily with women of our age, but that's really where my sights are as well, is this next generation, right? I have quite a few women in their early 20s that are looking for mentors, and they're not looking for mentors and how do I get ahead in my career? They're like, "No, no, how do I actually do it without doing it the way all of you did?" And I just think
Yep.
there's so much brilliance in the way that they're looking at how do I create my own level of success for myself that doesn't have to look like a model that I was told to chase. Well, we were just told to chase it. And so for those of us, we were like, okay, there's the model, let's go do it. So I think it's going to be a really interesting transition to how work is even conducted in the future. And I think that the biggest thing, and we talked about this, that AI can't replace is that human connection.
Mhm.
And so at the end of the day, I always tell women, I'm like, we're in the human connection business and we want to help women create aliveness.
Your workshops and such, give me a little bit of an overview. Are can we access those online, or are they strictly in person?
So
Like,
we do both. Yeah. So
okay.
we keep our in-person I always like to say I like to think of it as inviting women into my home, right? So we try to keep the in-persons very small and intimate because we want to create a different level of connection for that woman in person, but also or with herself, but also with the other women in the room. Our virtual experiences, I just had one this past weekend, are very lively. We experience, right? We talk about the great shift of what created with successful and high performing women to be exactly who they are, where the disconnection happened, and then ultimately looking at the cost, not from a place to stay, but as a way to open the door and say, well, okay, I'm really clear. I went through here, right? I went through this. I had this experience. I overworked or I pushed myself or I forgot about my health. Now I'm clear I want to do it a different way. So then we get very interactive in the sessions and we start, if you're familiar with design thinking, we use
Yes.
design thinking to
Yes!
start prototyping and ideating and creating new ways and new paths because I always say one choice isn't a choice. Two choices is a dilemma, but three choices actually creates possibility. And so the goal is like, how can I just continue to ideate with other women who are in a very similar experience as me to see what my next level could look like, whether that's with my professional or my leadership or my finances or my relationships. And so we really cater the Rich Like Her circle really around life and leadership, but we touch all dimensions of ultimately being a woman. And I think that's why women walk away feeling a sense of connectedness to themselves, but ultimately a new vision for what wealth could mean to them in a way that's deeply impactful and something that they don't feel like has to live outside of them, but is something they can cultivate within.
Okay, I don't want to give away all your trade secrets here, but would you be open to I got my pen and paper in front of me. Would you be open to doing one exercise or one thing that if I leave this podcast, I've listened to it and I go and do it, it will help me shift either a mindset or help me, me and I'm horrible about this. I'm a checklist crazy person, but help me kind of get some clarity or
Yes.
strategy. Would you be open to doing that? Just one
A
thing.
hundred.
Teach
Oh, I
teach
love it.
me one thing.
So, when we talk about whole woman wealth, there are six dimensions of wealth. So, there's achievement, leadership, identity, capacity, success, and self trust. And so, what I always start our experiences with women is looking at those words. What did it mean to you 10 years ago? And what does it mean to you today? And if they're the exact same, amazing. But if there tends to be a dissonance or a misalignment, those are the areas in which wealth could mean something so much more than what it currently is. So, for example, success, right? I would say 10 years ago, success to me meant I was making $1 million a year. Well, now success looks like to me, how many women can I impact in a year? I'm not saying I still don't need and want to make money to provide for my family, to provide for my team, but it's more important for me to impact women than to make the money. So if you look at each of those lenses, those six areas, and there's a dissonance there, there's an opportunity to look and ideate, right? And to think through at least three options of how can I continue to move myself closer in tangible ways to what it is that this new chapter or this reinvention or crossroads, as I like to call it, is asking from you.
When you were going through that list, leadership, achievement, leadership, identity, capacity, success, and self-trust. It is interesting how, as women, because of our biology, so many of these get shifted and changed, right?
Yes.
I would say that
Yes.
my capacity mentally is greater, but physically less than it was
Hmm.
15 years ago. My identity has completely done a 180 with menopause, my children growing up and no longer needing me to be the provider. I've had to shift our roles and our dynamics. My leadership has had to grow, significantly because I work in a creative space, so I'm working with a lot of young creatives that
Yes.
because I'm not a designer. I find a way to monetize the message. I find great messages, figure out how we're going to get that digital footprint so that they can do what they need to do in order to grow.
Hmm.
And working with 26-year-old, I wanna be a, indie indie documentary provider. I'm going, "You know that statistically only 72 people ever see your a specific documentary, and you work an average of 5 years."
Yeah.
This is where the statistics and they're going, "That's not nice." And I said, "It's the
It's
truth."
reality.
It's a reality, right? So, understanding not I think we understand where you're at, but I'm going through this going, "Wow, in the last 5 years, I would say on every single front, this has shifted."
Yes.
And wow, that's so and then just sitting with it. Do you just tell people to sit with it, to
No. So, oh, I'm getting I always like to tease and give you a snack, as you mentioned, Kim, but that's part of what we discover in the rich like her circles is that's ultimately where the day begins is there's a lot of self-reflections and assessments, and we work through how to ultimately tap more into fulfillment, right? Not as a word that exists as a concept, but literally, how can I find fulfillment every single day in an area of my life that I potentially have not had fulfillment? Because the beauty of being a woman is we are extremely dimensional, right? We're multidimensional, we're dynamic. And the challenge of that is we're trying to hold too many plates and too many things at once. And so our work so after the circles, our women tend to move into what we call an accelerator, where we're really focused on one or two maximum, I call them milestones, right? We don't like to call them goals and progress because that's still leaning more into that success hustle culture. But we're really looking at intentional ways of being that these women want to work towards. And I'm really grateful to say that we have 100% success. And it's because we are just as invested in these women having and achieving in a way that's meaningful to them, not in a way that's great on paper. At the end of the book, I say, the world will celebrate when you become rich like her, but you'll transform your life when you become rich like you. And so that's the goal, that's the energy, that's the vision of the brand that we are building because I believe when women start to trust themselves, when they start to lean into their power, when they redefine success for themselves, they literally can change not only their immediate surroundings, but they change the world for good. And goodness, that's the world I want to live in. That's the world I want my kids to live in. That's the world I want my grandkids to live in.
Do you have like a quiz or download or anything like that on your website or out there and available that we can just start getting a little bit familiar with how you work or how we would integrate into your space?
Yes. So if you go to my website, it's ajbishop.com. There's a variety of ways. One of the things, because we use design thinking as one of our philosophies of how we create experiences, there's a choose your own adventure. So
Okay.
we like to meet women where they're at. So some women say, hey, I just want an exercise to work through. Some women want to read the book. Some women decide, hey, I'm ready for a circle, or whether that's virtual or in person. And so we don't try to limit women into a funnel. We really want to meet women where they're at. And on the website, we're actually getting ready to do one more update, and we'll have there's a lot that will be coming. So I just always recommend you check out the site, and that is where our most up to date real time because we're co-creating these materials with real women, right? We have these circles once a month at minimum, but it's the best thing I get to do every day if I'm being really honest.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you a hard question.
Yeah, go for it.
If you had a podcast,
Mm.
what would the name be? And who out of everybody on this earth would be your first guest?
Ooh.
High as the
Well,
sky.
yeah, so the name of the podcast, I'm debating between whether it's Rich Like Her, because that's the book, or if it's Whole Woman Wealth, because that's the essence of what we're trying to create. And my dream has always been Oprah, right? I grew up with Oprah on television as a little kid. My mom was obsessed with
You
Oprah.
get a car and you
I
get a
I
car.
would I would
I love
love to
Oprah.
be able to tell my mother that I have met Oprah or talked to Oprah. Like that would my mom could care less about fancy cars and the house we live in now, but if I told her that I met Oprah, it would change, it would be her greatest joy. So that would be my first podcast interview.
Amazing. We're putting it out there to the world.
Thank you. Yeah,
Putting
thank
it
you.
out there. I believe that it's like being on a diet. If you don't tell anybody you're on a diet, you'll
That's
never
right.
lose weight.
That's right.
AJ, I could sit here and I could talk with you forever. Like, I just think you're an amazing woman. And I think what you're
Mm,
doing, I truly believe what you're doing is so vital for where we're going, especially with the wealth transfer, the protection of women who will be getting this revenue, this money in through the transference. My greatest fear is some predatory practices,
Yes.
the fraud,
Yes.
things like that. And then on the flip side of that, the mentorship where you and we're in our wisdom years. This is the decade that we need to be out there and banging that drum as loud as
Yes.
possible. And all I can do is hope that for the next generation, just like
Yes.
my mother hoped for my generation and her mother before her, that if each generation we just work to make it a little bit better.
Yes.
We're on our path. Things may look scary right now, and I think we are in for a bit of a hard time globally
Yes.
right now, but this is a time to lean in, show up at the potluck. Don't
Yes.
Yeah, don't bring the
Believe in people.
Yep,
Believe in people and believe in women and men, but
yep,
believe in women. I think there's tremendous power when women come together for good.
absolutely. AJ, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kim.
Absolutely, folks. Just go over to kimtalkspodcast.com. You will see, we'll have AJ's information up on our guest directory there. All of AJ's information will be in the show notes. And I just want to add to this conversation just a bit. I just want to say that if you happen to be the friend of, the sister of, the mother of, the cousin of, the woman who is evolving, give her grace, give her space. Don't stick her with the old stigmas. Don't say, you didn't do that before, so what makes you think you can do it now? Give her space so she can speak up and she can make the changes that the world so desperately needs. Thank you, AJ. Thank you for stepping into the studio with us today on Kim Talks Leadership and Legacy. If today's profile and strategy showcase gave you that just one thing you need to scale yourself, your family, or your business, don't let the momentum stop here. Take action now. Hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Share this episode with a speaker, coach, or founder who is ready to step into the bigger stage and amplify their message. And remember to visit us at kimtalkspodcast.com to unlock resources and discover our next events. Until next time, keep leading with execution, protect your ecosystem, and keep building a legacy that outlasts the daily grind. We'll see you on the next episode.